She was hired to clean marble floors she would never be invited to walk. In a mansion of glass and gold, Nala kept her head down, hands steady, heart armored. Then came the smirk, the whisper made loud enough to wound, the cruel laughter that turned a living room into a courtroom without mercy. Phones hovered, eyes judged. The rich woman thought she knew exactly who Nala was, what she was worth, until a single choice flipped the balance of power. Reputation shifted, secrets cracked, and the house that mocked her began to tremble. What happens when the person you try to break refuses to bend? Nala's mornings began before the city yawned awake. She tied her hair, checked the bus schedule twice, and packed the same canvas tote. Gloves, eco-cleanser, a worn notebook with neat lists. By 8, she was at the service gate of Bellevue Heights, the neighborhood of gates inside gates, where delivery vans whispered and gardeners learned to disappear. Nala was good at disappearing. It paid the rent, kept her daughter in school uniforms, and left just enough for the church pantry she stocked on Fridays. She moved through houses like a careful breeze, quiet, precise, accountable. Countertops gleamed, frames aligned, rugs brushed back to their original grain. She noticed things most residents never did. A cracked baseboard hiding water damage, a leftover wine glass tucked behind a curtain, a schedule scribble that betrayed a lie. She wrote none of it down. She kept her head down and her work perfect. Stability was its own kind of dignity. Yet the world pressed in. On the evening bus, headlines glowed from phones. Another story about someone like her treated like less. She breathed through it, promising herself patience, promising her daughter that patience still meant strength. At home, she studied for a certification exam after dinner, tracing diagrams by lamplight, building a future one page at a time. Few people knew about the exam. Fewer knew about the letter tucked at the bottom of her notebook, an invitation with a gold crest and a date circled twice. That morning felt ordinary. The lemon polish scent, the soft thud of her shoes on marble, the hush of a house that wore its wealth like a costume. But the air carried a sharper edge, like glass before a storm. A party was planned. A certain host liked performance, and performance needed an audience. Nala adjusted her tote, noted the cameras in the corners, and felt the first tremor of a day that would not stay simple. By noon, the mansion was alive with movement. Florists filled vases with roses the size of fists. Caterers clattered in the kitchen, and the air smelled of money pretending to be perfume. Nala moved quietly through it all, polishing, adjusting, making perfection invisible again. Then the lady of the house appeared, Victoria Langford, draped in silk and arrogance, her heels echoing across the marble like applause for herself. She was rehearsing charm for her charity guests, a fundraiser for urban education, the kind of event that used black struggle as decoration. When her gaze landed on Nala, it paused just long enough to assess and dismiss. "Make sure the serving table sparkles," she said, not really to Nala, but to the space around her. "We'll have photographers." "Yes, ma'am," Nala replied, steady and polite. But Victoria's smirk lingered, the kind that fed on imagined superiority. The first insult came soft, the way someone might brush lint off a sleeve. "Oh, you wear your uniform so well," she said, her friends laughing behind champagne glasses. "Almost looks like college attire. Where did you study again?" Nala smiled faintly. "I'm taking courses online." Victoria's brow arched. "How ambitious." The pause between her words was colder than the marble floors. By mid-afternoon, tension hummed through the air like static. Guests began to arrive. Donors, executives, the city's elite. Cameras flashed. Laughter bounced off the chandeliers. Nala stayed in motion, unseen yet hyper-visible, feeling eyes trail her as if her skin itself were a statement. In the kitchen, she overheard two servers whisper, "She's really going after her today." "Yeah," Guess the maid's too educated for comfort. Nala breathed slowly, focusing on the rhythm of her tasks. But then came the breaking point. The accident. A guest bumped into the drink cart, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth. Gasps rippled through the room. Before Nala could reach it, Victoria's voice sliced through the noise. Of course, it had to happen near you. Everyone turned. The music faltered. The wine had missed Nala entirely, but facts no longer mattered. Victoria picked up a napkin, dramatically dabbing the stain. "You people never learn to be careful, do you?" she said sweetly, smiling for the onlookers. "Can't even handle simple tasks." The crowd went still, that fragile silence when cruelty becomes public. Nala's throat tightened, but her expression didn't change. Her voice, when it came, was low but clear. "I didn't spill it, ma'am." Victoria tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, you sound defensive. Maybe that's guilt talking." Laughter fluttered nervously around the room. Cameras were still recording. Nala felt the heat rise in her chest. Not from shame, but clarity. This was no mistake. It was theater, and she had just been cast as the villain. But Victoria had no idea that the maid she was humiliating was recording every moment, and that what started as a whisper of injustice was about to become a storm. The laughter in the room faded into a tense hum, the kind that swells before a storm breaks. Nala stood motionless, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes sharp. Victoria smiled wider, sensing dominance. "Oh, don't pout," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's just a little spill. Maybe next time you'll pay attention instead of dreaming of being one of us." A few guests chuckled, hesitant, uneasy. Others looked away. That was always the way of privilege. Silence was its favorite accomplice. Nala slowly reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. A hush rippled through the crowd. "What are you doing?" Victoria asked, her tone still dripping with confidence, but now edged with uncertainty. "I'm making sure this doesn't get rewritten later," Nala replied quietly. "Every word, every look, every insult. I'm recording it all." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then Victoria's mask cracked. "How dare you? You think you can threaten me?" Her voice rose, brittle with panic. "You'll never work in this city again." Nala didn't flinch. If that's the price of truth, so be it. Her words carried something more powerful than defiance. Dignity. Guests shifted, their gazes darting between the two women. Someone whispered, "She's right." And phones began to rise around the room, cameras switching from decoration to defense. Victoria lunged toward her, trying to snatch the phone, but stumbled against a chair, her champagne glass shattering across the marble. The sound echoed like a verdict. In that instant, the image burned itself into every witness's memory. A wealthy woman dripping in jewels, caught mid-fall, reaching for power that was no longer hers. Nala didn't move. She simply said, "You told me to go back where I belong." "I think I just did," standing up for myself. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, others applauded. But above the noise, the truth had already spread. The video was live, and within seconds, what began in that marble room was racing through millions of screens across the country. Victoria's empire was crumbling, and Nala's silence had finally turned into something unstoppable. By morning, the video had spread across the country. Millions watched as the woman who once polished silver now reflected something far brighter: truth. Headlines called it "The Maid Who Spoke Back." News anchors debated whether it was an overreaction or a reckoning long overdue. But for Nala, it was never about revenge. It was about respect. Within days, Victoria Langford's foundation lost its sponsors. Brands pulled out of her charity events. Former staff came forward with stories of humiliation and exploitation. The same polished voice that once charmed city officials now trembled through public apologies that nobody believed. Her empire of image had shattered, not from scandal, but from exposure. Meanwhile, Nala received hundreds of messages from cleaners, nannies, cashiers, and workers who saw themselves in her. People who'd swallowed their pain for years, now realizing silence was never safety. One message read, "You spoke for all of us who can't." Nala read it twice, tears smudging the ink on her phone screen. She didn't take interviews. She didn't want fame. She wanted change. And change came, slow, uneven, but real. New labor protections were proposed for domestic workers in her city. The cafe where she once bought her morning tea displayed a sign that read, "Respect has no rank." Months later, Nala stood in front of a classroom at a community college. Not as a maid, but as a guest speaker. On the whiteboard behind her were 3 words written in bold. Dignity, courage, truth. She told her students, "They tried to define where I belong." But belonging isn't given by the powerful. It's claimed by the brave. The room was silent, not out of pity, but out of recognition. Because everyone there knew, at some point, they too would face their own version of that marble room. And as the video of her final words spread online, one question lingered in the minds of millions. How many more Nalas will it take before the world stops confusing silence with peace? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.